I see this growing problem in America of more and more people being pushed into liberal arts studies and more engineers and architects coming out, which is great, but you can have all the engineers and architects in the world design a bridge, but at the end of the day, somebody's got to build it.
Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Pro Talk podcast, a regular discussion with building industry professionals. This is Senior Editor Patrick McComb. Today I'm joined by Zac Strauss, a homebuilding apprentice in Wellington, New Zealand. You can find the Fine Homebuilding Pro Talk podcast and the original Fine Homebuilding podcast at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. You can leave feedback and ask questions there too. Zac, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. Thanks so much for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Patrick. This is a real treat.
You wrote into the FHB's editorial mailbox describing what you're doing in New Zealand. Can you talk about that, please?
Yeah, so I'm a regular reader and part-time listener, depending on what job it is that day. But basically, I thought, there's a lot of similar perspectives that I read about, and I just thought, I kind of have a slightly unique take on what it is to be abroad and learning the trade. So I thought I'd write in and offer my 2 cents.
And what are you learning to do? You mentioned in your email that builders in New Zealand could be described as generalists. They do a lot of different stuff. Can you talk about the apprenticeship you're in right now and what you're doing and what you have been doing?
Yeah, so actually I'll take you back to the beginning, because it's kind of where you start making sense of this story. When my partner and I immigrated over to New Zealand, she's from Italy, I'm from the States, and we needed a new place to call home. And when we decided on New Zealand. We were picking between Australia and New Zealand, and to be honest, a coin flip won out in favor of New Zealand, so that's how we ended up here. And we just said, whoever gets the first job will go there. And so I got a job at a building company in Queenstown, and when I was talking on the phone with them, one of the first questions they asked me was, well, Zac, are you qualified? And given my background, I had no idea what went into that, and I said, well, I'm competent, if that's what you're asking. And he goes, okay, well, we'll give you a shot. And so I get there and get on site and, put my tools together that I'd just gone and bought that day. And I start figuring out what all goes into being a builder here. And I'd done, a lot of handyman work in the States, and I'd worked for one construction company that did remodels. But as far as new homes, starting from scratch, I'd never done it. And I very quickly found out what it meant to be qualified here. And to be qualified, it means going through an apprenticeship process of approximately 2 to 4 years. And given that time, you learn the trade from the inside out. And to come back to your question about them being generalist, in a lot of ways, New Zealand's about, generously, let's say 20 to up to 50 years back in time from America was, in a lot of things, for better and worse. And one of those things is New Zealand builders have a much more complete picture of the trade. They're not as specialized as America is yet. And so, long story short, once I had learned about this apprenticeship program, which is something that I'd only ever read about in books of, the Middle Ages and working with your guild and doing your apprenticeship. So to learn about this idea in a foreign land, I thought, that sounds pretty cool. And I thought, yeah, I could do that. And so now I'm in my apprenticeship and finally working to be qualified.
And how far are you into your training?
Yeah, so I'm about 2 years into my formal training. I have now been working as a builder here in New Zealand for about 3 years. But as far as being in the program and doing the studying as well as meeting with my assessor, it's been about just into the early parts of my second year.
And have you done a great variety of different things? You know, when I hear about some of the work that apprentices do in this country, it's often the grunt, hard work of construction. And until you're in for long enough, you have little hope of doing anything more interesting. What is it like in New Zealand?
Yeah, that's real interesting because I think that's it's an older mentality of, the lowest peon has to do all the crap work, while, the ones up above get to take the glory. But that's changing here. And when I talked to the lead builders, our mentors, they said that growing up, that's how it was for them. They would have to break out the concrete and, clean all the boxing or forms, as you call them. And so, yeah, that was kind of their day in and day out, and you slowly earned the right to do more interesting, more fulfilling work, I suppose. But that's really changed, and pretty much from day one, starting my apprenticeship, I was already ticking boxes off for my apprenticeship because the model here is, let's just say you have 100 boxes you need to tick. And so one might be, framing a wall, another might be installing windows or putting in insulation. And so as you tick through this list, there's three more parts to it. And so the first part is, how have you seen this work done? The second part is, can you do this work? And the last part is, are you commercially competent? Meaning that, the boss can stick you on the site and say, insulate this room. Can you do it on your own in a reasonable amount of time? And so between the assessor and then your lead builders on site, they're the ones that determine where you're at in this process. And so, yeah.
And can I assume they decide if you're competent in that skill? I mean, it would be easy to judge oneself a little more leniently or critically, perhaps, than, objective third party. I'm guessing someone else decides if you're competent in the respective things.
Yeah. It ultimately comes down to the assessor. So we all have an assessor. I mean, it's kind of a check and balance system, I suppose, between the assessor and then your lead builder, who is the foreman on site. And so after the assessor meets with you and he talks about the theory, and then you also have to provide evidence of your work, then after your meeting, then he'll talk to the foreman and say, yeah, Zac says that, he's pretty good at insulation these days. He showed me his work. Where would you say he's at? And so it's kind of this check and balance system. But I think the part that I have really enjoyed about the system is it's not test driven. It's not a point system. It's much more dynamic, but also kind of a trust system, really. And there's lots of things here that people still really trust each other, and the industry is really built on trust and the sharing of knowledge. And I think that's what's made the experience so good for me, really.
That's cool. So,
yeah,
part of your email described how, as you described it, New Zealand houses were behind in the construction methods. And I think what you meant was regarding to insulation and air sealing mostly. Can you talk a little bit about how houses are built there and the kind of development you've worked on?
Yeah, sure. Well, again, I guess there's kind of been some parallels between the jobs I've worked and the type of work that I've wanted to pursue. Also, as I've gone along in my apprenticeship, these things have changed. But to start, I started with a company that was doing basically cookie cutter houses. They do a lot of prefab homes here on a lot of their new home developments. So flat pack walls arrive, you assemble wall A to wall B and then wall C and so on. And the first house I did, I thought, this can't be right. This just doesn't seem like how it should be. But I stuck it out, and I'm really grateful I started there, because it pushed me to the next step, which is I wanted to find a place where I would actually learn to build a whole house, not just a piece of it. And so then I went to a company, my most recent company, that was doing high-performing homes. And when I was having the interview with my old boss, I remember he said that they build their own frames. I said yes, and I didn't even take a look at the contract or the pay. Maybe I should have, but I was just so excited to actually learn how to frame up a house. And it's crazy, but it just wasn't. There was nobody else in the area aside from some very specialized bespoke homes that was doing that. And so this opportunity to really learn from the ground up really appealed to me. And so I took it. And in addition, they were doing very, very good quality homes. We call them high performing homes. I think I've read that you guys call it something similar. It wasn't quite a full passive home. But basically what it meant was, for all the codes, we were doing the very best. So for our exterior framing, we were using 2x6. I had to make sure that it didn't go 6x2. And that we were using the maximum insulation possible. And then we were using a product called IntelloWrap, which I'm sure you're aware of. And in following the magazine, I know that these aren't new concepts in America, but here it's really cutting edge. And so, we were building really, for here, very good homes. And so to come back to your question, most homes aren't like that. So most homes, your exterior framing is all done by 2x4, and it's minimum insulation. They've just started increasing the R rating for the requirements of insulation in homes here. They're all timber framed homes, because this is very earthquake.
We should clarify. So a timber frame, and as you know, probably in North America means timber frame, like big timbers. But you're like stud wood construction, like the U.S. Mainstream housing, right? Yeah.
Exactly. I'm sorry. I'm trying to translate, because I have both vocabulary in my brain. But yes, timber or lumber, anything wood related, they call it timber. So yes, stud framed homes are the normal here.
Like a plywood sheathing, or what's on the exterior skin?
Yeah. So again, this is a new concept. Most homes here are still done with building wrap. The high performing homes we were doing, they were done using a product called EcoPly. And so it's about 7 mil. So what is that? A third an inch, quarter inch? God, I have to be honest. I'm so happy to use the metric system.
Yeah. I know 5 mil is like close to a quarter inch, so I have to extrapolate everything up or down based on the one conversion I know.
Yeah, that's it. So yeah, about quarter, let's say quarter mil plywood, which it adds a lot for the building. It adds, insulation. It adds shear strength. So there's a slight push to start using products like that and rad board. But for the most part, building wrap's still quite common. And yeah,
you
like
put
I said,
that
this
right
company that I
over
was working
the
for was an
insulation, or is there a sheathing layer? And
Nope. Wow. Traditionally, most of the homes, it would just be, you would have your building wrap, and then you would have insulation on the inside, and then you were free to start your exterior cladding, or help me out. What's it called in America?
Exterior cladding is fine. Siding.
Okay. Siding. That was the
Yeah.
word I was thinking about.
So,
Yeah. So, anyways, yeah.
most folks here would be like worried about air infiltration in both hot and cold weather. What's your climate like? Is it mild enough that that's less of an issue, like in the Caribbean or other parts of the world?
Definitely not. It's there's kind of three main climates here. The South Island. So for those of your listeners that aren't too familiar with the New Zealand geography, in the South Island, it's very mountainous. The temperatures are more extreme, probably more comparable to like the Midwest. Let's think like a Colorado, except within stone's throw of Antarctica. So the winds that come through are a bit colder. Whereas the south of the North Island, it's a bit more like the Pacific Northwest. So like Wellington, where I am now, it's pretty comparable to an Oregon and Washington. Lots of precipitation, lots of gray days. The only difference is the wind is just through the roof. And then the north of the North Island is a little bit more Caribbean, actually. So it's very tropical, high humidity. So there is quite a big mix here. But to answer your question as to the air movement through the homes, it definitely is a problem. And homes like the one I'm in now, this was built in the 1970s, early 1970s, and these walls weren't insulated. And so you could feel the wind come through the windows. Windows weren't insulated either. So
You mean
yeah, it was
the
a very
single pane glass,
single pane.
Zach?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry to clarify. Yep. And so there was this running joke about how you could identify a New Zealand house, and it was the one where the curtains were moving on the inside, because that's really what it looked like. So
Do
yeah,
you want to talk about the space
Sure.
you're in? Because folks listening might want to go look to the website to see the room you're in, but it looks like you have what amounts to stud framing and then some kind of blocking in between the studs, and then what looks like very comfy insulation between them.
Yeah, so the house I'm in at the moment, it is a stud framed house. I'm helping some friends do a reline here, so we're replacing the drywall, and the blocks in between, they're known as dwangs here. And yeah, there's some polyester bats, which are they're slightly compressed, so we're getting a few more layers in, boosting the R rating a bit more.
And you've gone to
Yeah,
great effort to make them fit tight, which is probably helping with the air tightness of that space. I'm sure it looks like someone went to a lot of work to make
for
that
sure,
work. Yeah.
for sure. Well, that was one of the boxes to get ticked in my apprenticeship, and some of the information that went with it is, um, I believe it was a 1 mil gap in your insulation, could cause up to a 10% loss in heat transfer. And so that was quite a bit and pretty shocking for me. And the boss that I had, he took insulating very seriously. And there was multiple times where he came through and pulled out the bats and said, do this one again. And it just put the importance of doing it correctly, and not just doing it, but understanding why. And so when you understand that you're losing 10% of your heat because you've left a gap in this cell, then it just makes you think a little bit more.
You mentioned that you're doing, I think you described it as a reskin, maybe, with putting new drywall in. Is that part of a larger remodel? Is it just to improve the efficiency of the build? What's going on? Yeah, go ahead.
Yep. So, yeah, we're doing a reline, sorry, which is just changing out the interior lining. So we're switching off all the jib board, as they call it here, the drywall, you guys know it as there. And yeah, they because this room was cold because there was no insulation, so we wanted to address a couple of structural problems on the inside. There was a couple of timber that had rotted under one of the windows, so we had to switch out some of the framing there. And then we've just soundproofed the interior wall as well. And then we've also put some insulation into the corners of this home too by using some expanding foam. Because I'm sure that some of your listeners will know, but when you do the blower air test for a product like the IntelliWrap, what we found was we were actually losing quite a bit of heat and air exchange in the corners of homes. So at that company, we started doing the California corner so that we could actually get insulation into the corner. But on most homes, when you have stud block stud into the corner, then it's just pretty much a doorway for air to come in and out. So one of the things we've done here is we've actually sprayed insulation foam into the corners just to prevent a little bit more heat from leaving.
And you have the perfect opportunity to do that right now. I think you'd agree, right? With everything torn apart.
Yes, exactly. And so that's the thing. If you're going to strip it back to the studs, then you might as well do everything right. And that's what our friends here want to do. So, yeah, I'm all for it.
So what about residential development? Are most homes single family? Do you have attached dwellings too? Are they in like developments like you'd see in the U.S.? Can you describe that, please?
Yeah, it's changing. So I'll use where I grew up as an example. I grew up in Phoenix, Arizona, and in a sub-community of Phoenix called Arcadia. There used to be these huge, 1 to 5 acre plots in the middle of the town. And over time, these lots kept getting subdivided. And at first it was 2 homes, and then it might be 3 homes. But what made them beautiful were these huge front yards with, these massive front porches. And over time, the new houses were practically built on top of the street. And again, New Zealand, it's about 20, 30 years behind. And just about now, they're really starting to up their subdivision. And so the same thing's happening here. And so we've only lived in the town we live in now for 2 years, but in that time you're already seeing so much more, so many more infill of homes and properties being subdivided for that reason. So primarily single family homes, to answer your question, but you do see the odd community pop up, and in time you're going to see more and more of that.
Do you you mentioned ahead of our interview that you're transitioning to a new company to work for, and part of your interest is in rammed earth homes, and this company does that. Is that at all commonplace in New Zealand?
Yeah. So no, it is not common. But I guess after I'd done 3 high-performing homes for this previous company I was with, at first I thought, wow, this is amazing. Look at the quality of homes we're putting out. And then you see the blower air test and it's reading less than 0.5, and you think, wow, this is great. This has got to be what everybody's doing. But the more I did it, it started to dawn on me just how much waste there was in it. And, this company was doing, hands down, the best work in the region. And we took a lot of pride in our work, but I guess it reaches a point where it's no longer about the individuals working on the site or the quality of materials or work they're putting forward. It's about a greater system. And from my eyes, I just don't see the sustainability in how we build homes now. And so in looking, I started looking for, well, what else is out there? And, there's a bunch of, I want to say progressive, but they're not really progressive. They're old ideas. They're just a new take on it. And rammed earth is one of them. And so there's about 3 to 4 companies in New Zealand that do it. And one of the companies is up north in the tippy top. And that's the company that I'm going to go work for next. And the company that I hope to finish my apprenticeship with. And truth be told, I don't know much about rammed earth homes, except I believe it's a much more sustainable option for a number of reasons. One of them being there's just a lot less to the process. It's if you have a stud framed home, then you have stud framed walls, and then you have to wrap it somehow, and then maybe you put your plywood sheeting up, and then you're going to have maybe a cavity system, and then your exterior cladding, and then you got to paint it and all that, and that's just on the outside. So then when you go in, you got to insulate, you got to put your jib up, plaster, paint, blah, blah, blah. And so with a rammed earth wall that's about 300 mils thick, so about, what is that, 16? Oh, thicker than that, sorry, 12-inch thick wall. This covers everything. So it ticks all those boxes. It insulates, it's structural. It's a finished product. So the only thing from what I understand now is that you just need to seal it. And so
it's beautiful too. I think I would
and it
add
looks
to your
really
list.
beautiful. Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
I gotta wonder, is that one
yeah.
of the boxes in your apprenticeship checklist? Like, can you get, building certification, as I forget the term you use, but can you be a competent rammed earth builder in New Zealand?
Yeah, I don't think that's really not there yet, because there's not enough knowledge around it. And so it's kind of maybe the horse before the cart in the fact that there's companies doing it, but there's not really anybody yet to certify it. So I know, like in Australia, it's taken off. It's quite common over there. And I'm sure that there is somebody who can, validate what's going on and the process itself. But as far as I know, it won't affect my apprenticeship in any way. But the further I've gotten into my apprenticeship, I've learned it's not just about ticking the boxes for the apprenticeship. It's ticking your own boxes and what matters to you. And I think ultimately that's
those
what
are
we
the
should
most
all be
important
focused
boxes.
on. Exactly. It's not just about the certificate. It's what you get from the experience. So I could have stuck with the first company and just, connected wall A to wall B and then moved on to the next one. And I could have gotten signed off or completed my apprenticeship all the same. But for me, it's much more than that. I'm investing my time into something I'm passionate about. So why would I stop at any extent rather than seeing it all the way through to what I want to get out of the experience and what I want to give back ultimately?
I wish you all the success in finding what it is you want to do in the trades, because I think that's the joy in that work. In the work is you get to love your work. You mentioned one of the things that maybe prevents people from loving their work in the U.S. is that tradespeople are, don't have the same respect on societal charts as doctors, lawyers, professional folk. And you told me in your email that you thought that was different in New Zealand. Can you explain that and maybe tell me why you think that might be?
Yeah. This is something that I still just absolutely love about New Zealand. There's, so my partner's European, and it's the same over there, maybe even older, old school belief about, the division between a white and blue collar job. And in America, it's still there too. But here in New Zealand, I think it stems ultimately from how isolated they were in the world, and that it was really all hands on deck. And it didn't matter so much what you were doing, it just mattered more so that you were contributing. And I think somewhere along the way, the people that were more hands-on inclined really made bigger changes here. So your builders, your farmers, your electricians, your plumbers, somehow they've all pretty much progressed at the same levels as your lawyers, your engineers, your architects, and doctors. And so here, actually, to be honest, farmers are probably top of the food chain, pardon the pun. But then below that, a builder, doctor, it's very similar, and there's no shame in working with your hands here. Far from it. It's almost, I would say, you can have just as much pride being a builder as you can a doctor or anything else. So it was really eye-opening at first, just to see how different a culture values different jobs, and it's really enabled me to do what I do, because ultimately I don't think I probably would have become a builder had I not come here.
And it seems like you love it.
Yeah, that's really, it's a beautiful thing, and it's a pity all at the same time, because growing up where I did, I had no exposure to trades, and I grew up in a fairly white-collar neighborhood. I think I had one friend's dad who was maybe a plumber, but other than that, I knew nobody that worked with their hands. And I'm quite ashamed to say it looking back, but I think it was ingrained in me to kind of look down upon people that worked with their hands. And again, I'm certainly not proud of that. It's just how I was raised. And if you're not exposed to things, then you don't know any better. And so when I went to Australia for the first time I think it was 2016, I remember I was at a dinner with a mate of mine in Sydney, and he had over one of his plumber friends, Sparky, an electrician, and we were all sitting around the table, and it finally dawned on me that these guys were the same. Them and I, we looked the same, we could share the same meal, and they worked with their hands, and, well, I didn't work at the time, but that was the only difference. And I thought, well, shoot, I would really like to work with my hands, and it's always been in me, but I've just never had a chance to express it. And so really, if I could pinpoint it, it was there that it just opened my eyes to, well, I could probably do this. And so then when I went back to the States after that, I started looking into it. And I think, what did I do first? Oh, I went into a woodworking course in Phoenix. So there was a really good woodworking school down there. And so I first went into thinking, oh, well, maybe I'll do furniture. And that kind of gave me a start. But honestly, if I wasn't exposed to the idea here of doing it, I never would have done it.
So, I think you'd agree not all good days are good on the construction site. Can you talk about some really fun, enjoyable experiences you've had, and then maybe some of the more, let's just say, challenging days you've had?
Yeah, sure. Well, I've come to love framing days. So after the slab's all cured and ready to go, I do love getting into framing and, cutting your studs and piecing it all together. I think that's magic. So I really, really enjoy those days. As well as, I don't know, there's really two parts of me. There's the one who started as a furniture maker. It's still in me. So I really like detailed work. So your final fit-off days for doing all your trims and skirting boards, I love that finesse work. And getting to the end of the project, that's obviously great too. And then on the flip side of that, I'm not wild about concrete, especially having to tie steel and all that. I remember one day it was like middle of the summer here, so it doesn't get as hot as say Phoenix, but the humidity is just ridiculous, and so I think it was like 95% humidity and 90 something degrees, and we were bent over tying steel the whole day, and that was a pretty miserable day. But other than that, they're pretty good days. Actually, the first day on site in Queenstown, I remember I took my my first break. Actually, I was they call them smokos here because they're originally a smoke break, and so my boss there, he had to deal with a bunch of my learnings. Call it. He goes, "Hey Zac, it's smoko." I said, "Oh no, I'm good. I don't smoke." And he just looked at me, and he said, "It's break time." I was like, "Oh, okay, gotcha. Yeah. I'll take that." And so I remember I was having smoko, and I was sitting in the grass, and I was looking over the lake, and there's this mountain range there called the Remarkables. I was just laying back thinking, wow, I really live here, and now I'm working as a builder here. How cool is this? And so I still get a lot of those moments. Obviously, it's more of a routine now, so it's lost some of its shine. But in here where I'm working, I have an amazing view of the ocean, and I try not to take those moments for granted. But of course, you get used to them. And then, let's see, there was one more that I wanted to add. On my birthday this past year, we were just finishing up one job, and I was doing some exterior trim work, and I did something I really knew I shouldn't have. I was just trying to plane off this little piece to just fit it, and then I was like my 7th time going back and forth trying to finesse this piece to get it just right. And I'm always really, really good and safe when using power tools. But the 7th time, I thought, oh, it just needs one quick little pass, and so I went over it with the electric planer, and I'm still not exactly sure what happened, but the timber slipped, the wood slipped, sorry, and I took my thumb instead, and so I'm not sure if you guys can see, but
oh man,
it's pretty much come back. Which is amazing because it's only been 3 months, and it has been amazing to watch it grow back. I'll save your audience the details because it was pretty gnarly looking. But then the aftermath is what I thought was worth sharing, because there's this program here called ACC, which is like it's like a nationwide coverage for any accident. So if you came here and you went skiing and you fell down the slopes and you ended up in the hospital with a broken leg, you're covered. If I'm at work and I injured my thumb, the whole trip to the hospital was covered, and then after it's also covered. So ACC picks up 80% of my income until I'm fit to go back to work, as well as paying for any treatment I needed along the way. So, getting physical therapy covered, even things like acupuncture is covered, and it's an amazing program. really, really helpful to get back on your feet. Um, and yeah, so I thought I'd share that because I know whenever I tell my relatives, they're like, "What? What are you talking about?" And it's like,
Get
yeah,
national
no,
health care?
you're
What?
all entitled to that. Yeah, exactly, exactly. It's a pretty crazy
What? It's
concept, but
crazy.
having now used it, it's just amazing to have that peace of mind. It's so nice.
So many tradespeople in the U.S., I'm sure, as you realize, are uninsured. That is, and if you are, oftentimes it's because your spouse or significant other has medical insurance and can help cover you. It's a real problem we have.
Wow. Yeah, it's a problem that I have pretty much forgotten about here, and
Mm.
just again something now I take for granted. But yeah, just and it goes beyond work. It's going out for a hike and knowing that if I fell and broke my ankle, I'm fine.
Yeah.
We could be heli lifted from the spot and taken to the hospital, and there would be no problems. And I wouldn't have to face a massive bill when I got home. And so it just, yeah, I guess over time it just sits in, and naturally it changes your perception, and uh, I don't want to say the risks that you're willing to take change, but they kind of do, at least in what you think about them. So it's really good. Just saying.
What do you want to
Hmm.
do in the building business after your internship? Would you like to work for a rammed earth builder, as an example, for a long time?
Yeah, I think, I'm still figuring things out. And if you asked me a year ago, my answer looked completely different. So take it with a grain of salt. But I think I'm getting closer to what I ultimately want to be in. And I really feel passionate about sustainable building practices. Um, each time I have to do a load to the tip, it hurts. Especially when you have materials that came fresh in a bag one day and then the next day they're going to um, to the junkyard. And I would really like to see less of that. I would love to see, you know, natural forest coming back and the native trees getting replanted, instead of all the pine trees that cover the hills now. And so I know these are far-fetching ideas, but again, coming back to the systems we put in place, it doesn't, don't leave it up to the individuals. It's a systematic problem. And I think the more I get into it, the more I just want to try to find the right path to go down and then hone it from there. So I'm very curious about the rammed earth homes, and I'm pretty confident that it's going to be something that I'll really enjoy. Um, but you'll have to check in with me in a year to
I want to
verify
know,
that.
like, after your first week of running that pneumatic hammer, what that's like, because I think that is going to be a eye-opening experience.
Yeah, yeah, I'm sure it is. I at this point I can only imagine. Um, it's it's all pretty figurative up in my head, but
What your family's going to find ironic is you moved to New Zealand when you could have learned to do this in Arizona, I am sure.
there's so much of that that's true in so many aspects. I mean, even the town that we've been living in, Palmerston North, I kick myself sometimes because, when I was walking around Phoenix, it's all suburbs, and I just thought, man, I want to live in nature, or at least a big city, something different, and come around the world. And we lived in beautiful nature spots, Queenstown, but then I ended up in a suburb in the middle of New Zealand, and I just thought, oh my God, how have I managed to do this? But that's the irony, right? Like, even though we had it, it was right under my nose. I didn't have any awareness about it. And I think that was one of the reasons I really wanted to reach out was if I had heard from a voice like mine when I was a younger man, I would have been pushed into the trades a lot earlier. And I just think we really do young people a disservice by not exposing them to all their options earlier on. And like in my elementary, or not elementary, middle school, high school, we didn't have woodworking, we didn't have shop. All the hands-on classes, they were gone. And so even if that's in you, if nobody ever shows you, then you never know. And so I see this growing problem in America of, more and more people being pushed into liberal arts studies, and more engineers and architects coming out, which is great. But you can have all the engineers and architects in the world design a bridge, but at the end of the day, somebody's got to build it. And so I would love to see more growing awareness in America for how to get started, because speaking anecdotally, I didn't have that chance, and I just would like to see more of that.
Zac, it's been such a pleasure talking to you. I hope we can stay in touch and you can keep me posted on your career, because I would love to know how it goes.
Hi, thanks so much for having me on, Patrick, and I appreciate you taking your time.
And thanks so much for your support of Fine Homebuilding too. It delighted me to learn about your familiarity with the brand. That made my day.
Yeah, you guys do great work there, and needless to say, I read it as often as I can over here. So even though I'm building over here, I'm still pulling insights from you guys over there.
Well, it's been a pleasure talking to you, and like I said, I hope we can do it again. Thank you.
Thanks a bunch.
Well, unfortunately, that is all the time we have today. Thanks to Zac Strauss for joining me, and thanks to all of you for listening. Please remember to send us your comments, questions, and suggestions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. And please like, comment, or review us however you're listening. It helps other folks find our podcast. Stay safe, everybody. Keep craft alive. Zac, it was great talking to you.
Thanks so much.